It is time for us to speak out, to resist, and to protect those freedoms that we hold dear, that I myself raised my hand and said I will protect and defend. The time for complacency is done. The time for action is right now. I swore my oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Thank you, darling. All right, now, as I was saying, if you are familiar with my other live streams, you will know that I say this every time. We are being mindful of the energy we bring into this space, and we are going to be respectful in the chat, because if you are not, my mods will have zero problem hitting you upside the head with the ban hammer. Just saying. All right, tonight we are ranting about the cuts to the Department of Education with the intent of dismantling it, and we're going to touch on some of the issues going on with the National Park Service. All right, let's get started. Our rant tonight. Let's talk about the Department of Education and what it does and does not actually do. All right, first of all, the Department of Education does not set the curriculum for K through 12 schools. That is done state by state, and in many states, district by district. That is why when a child moves from, say, the state of California to the state of Washington, they frequently have to take more classes to catch up to what Washington requires that California did not. What does the Department of Education actually do? What? The DOE actually implements federal laws and policies that are focused on schooling. Pretty straightforward and simple, right? Right. Okay, now we are going to be addressing primarily Title I IDEA and Section 504. So, what is Title I? Okay, I have a quote directly from the Department of Education's website. Title I, Part A, Title I, of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as amended by the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESEA, provides supplemental financial assistance to school districts for children from low-income families. Its purpose is to provide all children significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education. In layman's terms, it sends federal money it sends federal money to schools with large, low-income populations to assist hiring additional teachers or bolstering core subjects. The federal government makes up approximately 14% of school budgets, but low-income schools do get more. Then, the Department of Education, not the Department of Energy, the Department of Education sends money to states under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to help support schools keep class sizes down and provides supports for disabled students and those with learning disabilities that states cannot afford on their own. What exactly is IDEA? This is something that McMahon, I can think of her husband's name, but not hers. But this is what Secretary McMahon had no idea what IDEA meant. That's hilarious sounding. Anyway, IDEA is a federal law ensuring a free and appropriate education, public education, for eligible children with disabilities, providing funding, guidance, and monitoring to states and districts. It covers students with disabilities from birth through age 21 or until they graduate high school. IDEA mandates that states identify and evaluate children with disabilities, provide them with individualized education programs, IEPs, which are written plans outlining a student's special education needs, their goals and services, and ensures that they are educated in the least restrictive environment. What is a least restrictive environment? That means that students with disabilities must be educated in the gen ed programs, basically mainstreaming, to the maximum extent appropriate, with supplementary aids and services provided as needed. IDEA provides students and their guardians with rights and protections throughout the SPED process, including the right to participate in decision-making and to seek dispute resolution if necessary. IDEA is how one of my own kids managed to graduate from high school. We started with an IEP in the 3rd grade, just prior to their autism diagnosis, when we were just working with the ADHD, and my child needed accommodations for their ADHD. After their autism diagnosis, we ended up with a 504 plan, which is covered by the Office for Civil Rights, which we will be discussing shortly. Yes, okay. All right. So, what is the Office of Civil Rights? Okay, the Office of Civil Rights protects students and teachers from discrimination. The OCR receives tons of complaints and inquiries in the area of elementary and secondary education involving Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Most of these concern identification of students protected by Section 504 and how to obtain an appropriate education for those students. Now we're going to discuss what exactly is Section 504. It is a federal law designed to protect the rights of disabled people in programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance from the Department of Education. It provides, quote, "No otherwise qualified individual with a disability in the United States shall, solely by reason of his or her disability, be excluded from the participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance." The Section 504 regulations require a school district to provide a, quote, "free appropriate public education," FAPE, to each qualified student with a disability who is in the school district's jurisdiction, regardless of the nature or severity of the disability. Under Section 504, FAPE consists of the provision of regular or SPED and related aids and services designed to meet the student's individual educational needs as adequately as the needs of non-disabled students are. So basically, 504 is what gets special ed kids their education in the mainstream classrooms. All right. Now, the Office of Civil Rights enforces Section 504 in those programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance from the Department of Education, such as public school districts, institutions of higher education, and other state and local education agencies. So basically, what the administration is currently trying to do is take education away from sped kids. They are dismantling and getting rid of Head Start. They are destroying the Office of Civil Rights, and they are flat out ignoring Section 504 and the idea. Okay, so the Department of Education is required to ensure that teachers and students with disabilities are not discriminated against. Secretary McMahon wants to move disability rights enforcement to Health and Human Services, which is currently overseen by RFK Jr., who has an unique view on disabilities, and the Office for Civil Rights to be moved to the Justice Department, which doesn't have a backlog of cases or anything, right? Right. All right, so now we get to the meat of the issue. Tuesday, the department began laying off around 1,300 employees, Department of Education, cutting nearly half the staff in its Office for Civil Rights, and over 100 people from the Institute of Education Sciences, according to information released by the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 252, the union for department staff members. Okay. So, the cuts in these two divisions mean that there will be far fewer staff members to finish the 12,000 pending federal investigations into allegations of civil rights violations at schools, roughly half of which involve disability issues, and fewer employees to review and distribute government-funded research into effective ways to educate children with autism or severe intellectual disabilities. Considering the person in charge of Health and Human Services honestly believes the long since debunked theory that autism is caused by vaccines and is an anti-vaxxer, are we surprised? All right. The Department of Education also makes sure that FAFSA is available and that the info that students give to FAFSA gets to the colleges, and the finances are therefore dispersed. It also ensures that for-profit colleges are not scams. Trump University, anyone? So, the Department of Education is a watchdog for student civil rights. I have a pretty sneaking suspicion that this is why they want to do away with it in K-12 schools. If disabled students aren't getting the appropriate support they need, such as ramps, occupational therapy, or a para-educator, their family can file a complaint with the DOE's Office of Civil Rights. They can also file with the Office of Civil Rights if they believe they've experienced racial discrimination. I'm sorry, my brain just blue screen of death on me there for a second. But chances are that complaint will go absolutely nowhere because that office currently lacks the staff needed to follow up, and once it gets moved, there's still going to be such a backlog that the complaint might get eyes on it by the time that student graduates. All right, so the Department of Education also supports the Institute of Education Sciences, which conducts research on education around the country, including the National Assessment of Educational Progress tests, most likely the best source we currently have of nationwide data on our students' reading and math skills. You would think that where Trump is so concerned about how we're ranking so low on standardized tests compared to other nations, maybe he'd want to keep this? I don't know. All right, so Project 2025. Yes, this thing again. Project 2025 calls for converting Title I funds into grants that go to the states. Like, that's going to go over well, right? Since 1965, Title I has provided critical financial help to high-poverty schools and districts. Project 2025, well, they plan to eliminate Title I funding entirely. In its place, states will now receive a no-strings-attached block grants with absolutely zero regulations or oversight. The Center for American Progress recently did an analysis and found that removing this funding would also worsen the current teacher shortages by wiping out over 5% of the current workforce, mostly in low-income communities. Does any of that sound good for our kids to you guys? Doesn't to me. Yeah. Now, I am really, really pissed off about this because of the fact I am a special ed mom. So this hits really close to home for me here. Oh, this next bit. As soon as the fascist Cheeto was inaugurated, the department's processing of disability rights complaints stopped, creating a dire situation for students leaving at least one 12-year-old autistic and epileptic boy, among other kids, without protection and suffering significant educational setbacks. This young man was forced to remote learn, on the computer from home like we did during COVID, when it was in his best interests to be in school with his peers. Yeah, they don't care. So while processing of disability cases resumed in the middle of last month, race and gender discrimination cases, they're still dead in the water. They're not moving. What has the department focused on instead? We might ask. Well, trans athletes, the whopping 10 trans women athletes at collegiate level, and all gender bathrooms. The agency has also informed school leaders that they could, come on, this is Trump world, face investigation if they take steps to diversify staff or attempt to bring in students of color for selective programs, such as the University of Washington here in Seattle with their PhD project. I mean, come on. We all know that Black and Hispanic kids don't belong in the gifted programs or the CEO's office, right? And if you think I'm serious, I got a bridge to sell you in San Francisco. So, these cuts at the Institution of Education Sciences include addressing young children's literacy and improving the transition from high school to the working world for disabled students. So yet again, we're back to the disabled kids getting the shaft. Are we surprised? I'm not. The kicker here. The Institute is being dismantled during a time of growing nationwide concern over declining scores. But hey, without the data on those scores, we the taxpayers will have a harder time seeing the impact of those cuts to the education program on the education of our children. I.e., we're freaked out over the fact that the scores are going down, so they're just going to stop giving us the scores. Someone please make this make sense. Oh, and gutting the research and oversight functions of this department is going to make it a whole lot easier for colleges to lie to students about graduation rates and the success of their alumni. Trump University? Parceling out Title I and IDEA to other departments could weaken the program's ability to serve the students they were created. Son of a Seabiscuit. Parceling out these programs to other departments could weaken the program's ability to serve the students they were created to support, the ones with higher needs. The DOE is, or was, full of experts who have spent their entire career serving students, and the other departments will not have that expertise. Not to mention the fact that those departments are in Doge's sights. So, let's talk about the Civil rights enforcement. Civil rights enforcement has been drastically cut. Are we shocked? I'm not shocked. Are you shocked? The Department of Education's explanation of the Office of Civil Rights and the attorneys who work there is that they are tasked with preventing, identifying, ending, and remedying discrimination against America's students based on race, national origin, sex, age, and disability. The race, national origin, and sex are the big factors to it, I'm willing to bet, because the current administration has shown repeatedly that those people with a little more melanin in their skin are lesser beings, in their opinion. The fascist Cheeto thinks that disabled people, or at least profoundly disabled people, should just die. I have a direct quote from his nephew. Those people, Donald said, trailing off, the shape they're in, all the expenses, maybe those kind of people should just die. That is a direct quote from a piece his nephew wrote for Time magazine, which you saw the screenshot of. His uncle said this to him after he, his wife, and several experts spoke with Cheeto Man in May of 2020 about support for people with intellectual and physical disabilities, something his nephew's own son lives with. He was saying this about his own great-nephew, that his great-nephew should just die. Why? Because in his opinion, they are a financial burden. I have another direct quote. Here, he's speaking directly about his nephew's son. I don't know, he finally said, letting out a sigh. He doesn't recognize you. Maybe you should just let him die and move down to Florida. I'm going to break a tooth clenching my jaw. I have family who are profoundly disabled. I do not have words for the rage that incites in me, and my hair just decided to fall. Anyway. So, knowing that this is how he feels, I am honestly not shocked that he wants to be rid of the programs that advocate for those students. Because he doesn't think they need to live. We should just kill them off and be done with it. Okay, so, moving on, kind of. Data from the Department of Education shows that at least 240 Office of Civil Rights employees have been laid off, and most of them were attorneys who investigate parental or familial complaints of discrimination against a child. NPR acquired information showing that over half of the OCR's 12 field offices will be closed. New York City, Boston, Philly, Chicago, Cleveland, San Francisco, and Dallas. They're just closing them. So now, while the layoffs don't directly affect the funds for IDEA and Title I, sources in the know have told NPR that the administration has fired literally every attorney responsible for helping states and school districts understand how they can and cannot use the funds, and those who raise red flags when a state or district is violating the funding laws. That's not suspicious at all, witchlings. I want to repeat. All the lawyers responsible for helping school districts figure out how they can and cannot use those funds have been fired. What this means is states will still get those federal funds, including funds for homeless students and rural schools, but the government will no longer have the ability to offer legal advice or guardrails to ensure that money is going where it's supposed to. Legal guidance, correction. So, who wants to bet that those funds are now going to get sent to the high school football team? Because we all know football is more important than the disabled kids. All right, now let's talk Doge cuts to the Institution of Education Sciences. Because don't we all love Doge right now? Doge says it cut roughly $900 million worth of research contracts. Definitely talking with a borrowed tongue tonight. Doge says it cut roughly $900 million worth of research contracts. That sounds great, but it really isn't. These cuts included contracts to study everything from the best ways to teach literacy to the youngest kids, to helping special needs students make that sometimes difficult transition from high school to the working world. On top of the Doge cuts, the Department of Education fired over 100 IES employees, Institute of Education Sciences employees, many of whom were research analysts who specialize in K through 12 studies and adult and career education. Are these not important programs? Hey, all right. I'm done ranting about schools for a minute. Let's move on to Trump and the Federal Parks Service. So, I have a thought. Is the fascist Cheeto targeting the national parks partly because of Seattle's lone national park? I think that's part of it. So, I say so a lot. I apologize for that. Seattle is home to the Klondike Gold Rush Museum. It is a small but fascinating little museum. I've been there myself on a field trip with one of my kids, so it's been a few years and I don't remember this bit, but let's talk about some of the information they have on Fredrick Trump. So, Fredrick Trump, whose name was originally Fredrick Trump, Trumpf, was a German immigrant who, before the Klondike, had experience with business ventures in Seattle, running restaurants. Now, Fredrick Trump didn't want to mine for gold. I'm betting, based on what we know of his son and his grandson, that this was just far too much physical labor for him. So he focused on providing services to the prospectors. He opened and ran establishments that offered food, lodging, and other necessities, such as restaurants and hotels. Remember the hotels bit. It becomes important. He had these establishments not only in Seattle, but in Bennett, British Columbia, and in Whitehorse, Yukon. Historical records indicate that his establishments provided food and lodging, and suggests that they also provided gambling and prostitution. So, Grandpa Trump was the proud owner of a brothel or two. This is something that the fascist Cheeto vehemently denies, but having been to said museum, I am aware of the research that goes into verifying the accuracy of their exhibits. So, he capitalized on the needs of prospectors, mining the miners, fleecing them more like it. Grifting apparently runs deep in this family. By doing this, he was able to accumulate wealth during the Klondike Gold Rush, which he then passed down to his sons and grandson. The fascist Cheeto man also wants to eliminate any barriers to being able to log and mine protected areas because they have mineral deposits, oil, and trees that can make him money. He doesn't give a flying fig about the endangered species living in these areas. He sees dollar signs. So he figures if he guts the National Park Service, there won't be anybody to stand in his way, right? Right. Now, a federal judge did order that thousands of those terminated workers be rehired, but are they going to come back? If I were them, I don't know that I would, not to mention that the administration has already filed an appeal to prevent it and have already said that there are more layoffs coming soon. So what's the point of taking the job back only to be laid back off 2 weeks later? All right. Now, what can we do to help prevent the dismantling of the Department of Education? We're going to go back there for a minute. First, encourage your state attorney general to file a lawsuit challenging the legality of these actions. Next, look into the class action suits being brought by groups like the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates that are focusing on the impact of these changes on disabled students. There's the tried and true method of contacting your representatives to let them know that you oppose the idea of dismantling the Department of Education. Encourage them to oppose any legislation that comes before them aimed at that. Okay? Join public protests, as long as we're still allowed to have them, that are being organized against the dismantling of the DOE. Help spread awareness of the potential impact on vulnerable students in the event of the dismantling of the DOE. And as for the National Park Service, the biggest thing you can do to help save our national parks is donate. Donate your money if you have it. Donate your time by volunteering. The powers that be can't bitch about the cost of the park employees if they're volunteers, right? Right. He is destroying our country, slowly but surely. And it just... I am so frustrated I don't have words, and for anybody who knows me, that will shock them. All right, my friends. We are going to, with that, call it a night. So, if you liked what we did here and you want to see more of my rants and stuff like this, then do the like, share, subscribe thing. Hit the bell. I need a drink. And then go out there and spread love, joy, and especially kindness right now. There is so much darkness and hate out there already. Please be the light that someone else needs. Tell your loved ones, human, scaly, furry, and feathered, that you love them beyond measure because you do not know how long you'll have with them. And trust me, that 2 a.m. phone call sucks. And then remember, you are loved, you are wanted, you are needed, and you do have a purpose in this life. I'll see y'all later.